I'm kind of chuckling because so remember how like in the 90s and the early 2000s, right? You'd have giant ERP implementations. You're trying to install, SAP or PeopleSoft or Siebel, and they'll be like, okay, it's a 1-year project. Cool. I'm going to sign a check for $3 million, 1 million. In a year from now, I'm going to have a nice automated supply chain. And then they'll be like, oh shit, you know what? We need to install BMC Remedy to do this. We need to, increase our Oracle database because of that. And before you know it, it's a 4-year project, and you've only got 25% of your SAP implemented. And you fired Deloitte, bring in Accenture. Accenture fucked up. Let's bring in Capgemini. And it kind of feels like, I've been in rooms with executives where, I've been asked the question, hey, so should I go for PKS or EKS, or should I go for Rancher, or should I go for this or that? And I'll give an answer, but like, I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, I know what I'm saying, but I don't know what, no one has this like nice map of the world that's the safe answer, the safe cushy, like, okay, am I making the right investment? What are the questions, if I'm a line of business executive, what are the questions you would urge them to ask? Very simple, right? Because we're not going to have them get into, Kubernetes levels of the stack and whether it's on Ubuntu or not. But what are the questions one should ask? What are the basic 3 check boxes one should ask? Okay, is it this? How is this? When is it this? Like, what would you think those are? Sorry to put you on the spot, but it feels it's so needed, especially with C and CF related levels of the stack. When you're about to sign that giant, $3 million check for the CIO that's bringing you a Kubernetes bill.
Well, it's a startlingly boring question with startlingly few answers, which are startlingly difficult to judge, right? So the boring question is, who's going to wash the windows, right? Everybody wants to be the architect who's going to build the skyscraper, which is going to, save the business or build the business, right? In a large organization, you have no shortage of people who will say, pick me, I'll build the data lake, or pick me, I'll build the Kubernetes, or pick me, I'll do this, that, and that. But ask them who's going to wash the windows on that edifice, right? We live, the CIO's exhaustion, I think, comes from past brilliant decisions, right? Well, let's buy this thing and integrate it. Let's buy that thing and integrate it. Let's buy the next thing and integrate it. And you're still living with all of those choices. Even if you didn't buy it, if some developer effectively chose it and integrated it, now you're still living with it, and you have to answer questions about it. You have to wash its windows, right? And that's a really unsexy job. That's not the job that everybody's putting their hand up to do, right? And yet that will be 80% of your spend in future on this piece of software, right? So, and that's even more true if that software is unlicensed, if it's free, right? If it's open source. So that's the easy question to ask that very few people, I think, have comprehensive answers to, right? Most people are like, well, I'm going to build it manually, and then I guess it'll be maintained manually. This is why I think the clouds have such a compelling offering today, because they're building products, they maintain those products, and you effectively get that maintenance just by continuing to use the products. So, when you take advantage of a cloud service, you're also essentially buying into its roadmap, and you don't have to provide that roadmap, right? So I think this is one of the key issues that people don't know how to ask. And when they do ask, they don't really get a straight answer from their own people, right? Because the people who want to go fast and integrate the latest thing because it's great and it's on GitHub and it's the new thing aren't actually the people who know how to think about what that's going to feel like in 10 years' time, because they won't be around, right? And so you tend to get glib answers, you tend to get simplistic answers, or you tend to get, motherhood and apple pie. And very few people have deep answers to those questions. In the end, though, that will become 80% of your IT budget, right? So going deep on that now, I think, is important. That's, again, why I think Canonical is so well positioned for this age, right? Everybody who's moving fast into open source is essentially reducing their barriers to entry to the tar pit. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to trap people. I think everyone should be going to open source. But because we are so focused on how do you essentially help people get out of a tar pit, how do you look after the maintenance, how do you think about integration in a different way, how do you enable operations in a multi-cloud way, right? Those are all very important questions that institutions are going to find they have no good answers to because they've all rushed into open source without really thinking about that. Because Canonical is A, the vehicle that many people are going to open source on, and B, really thinking about that, I think we're in a very good position to help organizations. That's why we have to really invest in those operational technologies, so that essentially we're putting people on rails for their adventures.